Good morning, honorable members.
Recording in progress.
I would like us to...
Morning, my chair. Morning, chairperson. Morning,
Morning.
Mhlekazi.
Morning, honorable one. Honorable members, I think we should start the meeting. It's already 10:05. Let me start off by welcoming you, honorable members, and welcome, of course, the Deputy Minister present, Honorable Phili Mapulana, and welcome the DG, Mrs. Nongubela. Welcome all the officials, both from Parliament and officials from the department. But more specifically, allow me to welcome ICASA. I assume that the commissioners are here, including the chairperson, as well as the CEO, accounting officer of ICASA. And as you know, that today is a day dedicated from us to receive a presentation from ICASA. I think it is the first time that we meet with ICASA this year. So this is very, very important for us, because part of the reason why we want to hear from them is to get a sense if things are going okay and there is monitoring of all the entities that should comply with the provisions that ICASA stipulates to them. I now wish to say that this meeting is then duly open and you are all welcome. Amanda, I just want to check the issue of attendance of the members. Are our members on board? Are they connected? Or there are still members struggling?
Good morning, Chair. There are about 7 members on the platform, so we can start the meeting.
Okay, no, thank you very much. No, the meeting has already begun. I just wanted to check if all of them are here. So if we have 7, I think we even make quorum. Having said that, then let me then invite the department, that is the line function department responsible, or that has an oversight over or administrative support to ICASA. I'm going to invite the Deputy Minister to lead the delegation. And offer him an opportunity to start making his remarks, and then give a direction as to who will be making the presentation. And we will take it for there. And indeed, Deputy Minister, let me really express my appreciation that you have made it here. We did receive an apology from the Minister, and we know that Wednesdays are cabinet days. So we are happy that you are here to represent the minister, because it's always important to have the political heads present here when we are engaging with entities. Maybe just before I allow you, DM, to speak to us, Amanda, do we have any other additional apologies? Because that's the only apology that was put before my table.
No, Chairperson, I did not receive any other apology.
Can I ask maybe from other members is there any apology?
Yes, Chairperson, Karen Fesser is struggling to connect. In fact, she doesn't have signal at all.
Okay. Noted. Thank you, Honorable Nana. I now wish to invite Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, to address us in making his remarks as a preface to the presentation that we will receive from ICASA. Deputy Minister, you can migrate to the podium.
Good Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, and good morning, greetings to all the honorable members on the platform. Greetings also to the councillors of ICASA who are present here, our Director General, all other members, or all other participants in the meeting, if I may put it that way, Chairperson, all those who are attending, greetings. Let me also, Chair, confirm the apology of the Minister who's not available today, who's attending Cabinet. As you said, Chairperson, Wednesdays, apologies, Wednesdays are not really convenient days for members of the executive, because it's either cabinet or it's cabinet committee. So if there's cabinet committee, all members of the executive are under obligation to attend those meetings. So sometimes we may not be available to come to the portfolio committee or the select committee. Chair, I just want to say that the detailed presentation has been prepared by ICASA as you requested, which will deal with the competition issues arising from the auctioning of the spectrum. And related to that, the question whether has this contributed towards lowering the cost to communicate in the country. So that presentation has been made available. I think it has been shared with yourself. I just want to say that as we've always consistently said, that this auctioning of this high demand spectrum represent a significant milestone in our country. As you know that there's been difficulties that we have experienced in the process of auctioning the spectrum. There's been litigation after litigation until all these litigation issues were resolved, and ICASA, as the authority, was able to proceed in March last year with the auctioning of the spectrum, which was a very successful auction. And we must say that we're also happy that out of this auction, the National Fiscus benefited for the amount benefited from the proceeds, which amounted to about 14.4 billion, which money we're still collecting because there was a point where not all the available spectrum that we auctioned was made available to the mobile network operators. I must say that as of the 31st of July, we successfully migrated all the broadcasters from any band above 694 megahertz. So all the available lots of spectrum that was auctioned last year is now available to the telcos as a result of us having to migrate all the broadcasters who were occupying those slots. As you know, Chairperson, we entered into a two-stage agreement with the broadcasters. Two-stage in a sense that we agreed with them that from the 31st of July, all of them have to be migrated below the 694. As you know that all the spectrum that was auctioned was above 700 megahertz, so that we can make it available for the telco. So that has been achieved. But there are other areas where there is still analog broadcasting. Not many transmission sites are transmitting analog broadcasting. And this is going to be done until the end of December next year, so that we can allow the broadcasters some space, because we know that they've been affected by COVID. There's also this effect of analog switch off that they are dealing with. So we thought that we should allow them space to continue with dual elimination until the end of next year. So the entire spectrum that was auctioned is available. We expect that ICASA, as the authority, will facilitate that all of that which has been auctioned is paid for, and the fiscus received that amount. I must say, Chair, on the question of the cost to communicate and addressing some of the competition in the sector, as the department, we are working on that. Cabinet has approved the draft bill some couple of weeks ago, which we are finally consulting, and very soon it will be tabled in Parliament. This bill seeks to take forward the recommendations of the Data Services Market Inquiry that was done by the Competitions Commission on the issue of the cost to communicate. So that is something that we're doing in the department to address the very question that we posed to ICASA. But of course, there is a presentation, and I would like to take this opportunity to invite the authority to take us through the presentations that they've prepared. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Asbong, Deputy Minister, thank you very much for those opening remarks and setting the tone to this presentation. I see someone raising a hand there. That device is registered as 1 AFS Peter. Who's that?
Thank you, Chairperson. Can I proceed? I'm from ICASA, Chairperson.
Oh, okay. No. Just wait a moment. I was going to call ICASA. No problem. I've noted you, Peter Zimri. No, thank you, Deputy Minister, for that opening remark. I think it's appropriate that at this point, I also take the opportunity to congratulate the appointment of the DG of the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, Ms. Nonkubela Jordan Kyan. As a committee, we wish to take this opportunity to wish you all the best during your term in office. We have been made aware through the cabinet communique that you have been appointed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with effect from the beginning of this month. So we are happy. We have worked with you before as an acting DG, and on behalf of the members of this committee, as I say, we wish you absolute success, and we're looking forward to working with you closely in ensuring that everything that needs to happen when we interface with the department will happen as you know the needs and the requirements of the committee at all material times. Congratulations again. I now invite the lead councillor from the ICASA to take us through the presentation. Over to you. I assume that it will be you, Peter. You can take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, let me first thank you for this opportunity, and also just just greetings to the Deputy Minister, the DG, and also the honourable members on this platform or on the call. Chairperson, unfortunately, our chairperson or the acting chairperson is not available for this meeting, but I will take the committee through a presentation that was prepared, and we will then take further questions on the content thereof. I will also be joined by some of the colleagues, which I think they struggle to join at this point in time. But the chairperson, I'm here. I think I can proceed with a presentation and take it from there. Chairperson, yeah. So our presentation is going to be. I'm not too sure how much time do I have for this presentation, but I've got a couple of slides that I need to take the select committee through, and basically. Then obviously after that we'll respond to any questions that might, or points of clarifications that might arise from the presentation itself. I believe that the presentation was shared with the committee members. Chairperson, at this point in time, I'm going to load up the presentation, if that's in order.
No, you can pretty much go ahead, and it would have also assisted us for you to indicate how much time you require, so then that we can meet each other halfway.
Great. Thank you, Chairperson. I hope the slides
would 30 minutes be enough for you?
That should be in order, Chairperson. Thank you.
All right, go ahead then. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Chairperson, I think I've got quite a few slides, but some of the slides will obviously we'll certainly have to skip it. Mostly for background information, and also for other members that might not be well aware of the process that we undertook in terms of the auction itself. And as the Deputy Minister also alluded to earlier on, is that we obviously have to now see what were the benefits of this inaugural auction that we had, and see how do we then ensure that the members of the public enjoy this scarce national resource that was auctioned to the operators. Chairperson, our outline of the presentation is once again, like I said, the earlier part is basically our organizational mandate, which is our very standard input to our presentations, and then we will go into sort of the auction overview of the auction to give members also an opportunity to engage on that. We will then go over into what we call the social obligations that we imposed on those that acquired spectrum through this auction, and basically, I think we will also show that what we need to realize is that with these social obligations, what we call zero rating of government websites, and also at least the connectivity to public service institutions at zero or no cost at all. Chair, then we will go into some additional obligations that the authority imposed on the licensees. For example, the virtual mobile operators. We also then look into the coverage obligations, and lastly, we will also further look into some other obligations that we impose in terms of the sharing of spectrum, whether it's which operators might or might not use at some point in certain areas. The one other issue, Chair, that we also want to look into, Chair, is other initiatives that the authority embarked on to reduce the cost of communication in this country, and we'll touch on that, Chair. And I don't think we have to spend too much time on it. Chair, this is our organizational mandate for ICASA. We do have quite a broad mandate in terms of we are established in terms of Section 192 of the Constitution, and we regulate the electronic communications, broadcasting, and postal sectors in the public interest. And we also would like to ensure universal availability of high quality services, including broadband services for all South Africans at affordable prices. Chairperson, the CEO was supposed to deal with this part of the presentation, but I think, once again, I think they're struggling to join. Chair, this is our mission, vision, mission, and our values that the ICASA adopted. Our vision is to have an inclusive digital economy. The mission is to regulate electronic communications, broadcasting, and postal services in the public interest. That's always on top of mind. Our long-term impact statement is basically access for all South Africans to a variety of safe, affordable, and reliable communication services for inclusive economic growth. Again, we got certain desired outcomes in terms of what our mandate allows us to do: effective competitive market, variety of quality services at affordable prices, universal service and access, especially to broadband, and social cohesion and common national identity. Chair, as much as we dealing spectrum management and spectrum licensing is one of our core aspects that ICASA is mandated to do under the ICASA Act, we also provide services to licenses in terms of equipment approvals. We also further look into interconnection and facilities leasing, and once again, spectrum assignment, licensing and authorization of broadcasting channels, and registration and license exemptions. To services to the end users, our mandate allow us to impose universal service obligations, as I mentioned earlier on, looking into local content, quality of service, and consumer protection. At least it needs to be done at competitive prices. So this slide it's a very busy slide, and members, it's a very busy slide. It's basically just as ICASA and also with the department, we do our spectrum management mandate within this broad framework. On an international level is the ITU. Regionally, we on the continent is the African Telecommunications Union, the Southern African Development Communities, where our sort of a mother structure is ICASA, the Communications Regulatory Authorities of Southern Africa. And we with SADC, we try to harmonize our band plans, channel arrangements, and also policies and regulations. Locally, the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies sets policy for spectrum, and also basically convene preparations of international engagement for the World Radio Conferences that will be later in this year. As ICASA, we award spectrum licenses, and also we're responsible for developing the band plan and also the subsequent radio regulations. Other government departments that's also involved in spectrum management is the Department of Science and Innovation, basically the SKA project that's quite active and running quite well at this point in time. The Department of Health in terms of safety and radiation. The South African Civil Aviation in terms of aviation, SAMSA, the Maritime Safety Authority, and the South African National Space Agency in terms of coordination of space activities in the country. Chair, this slide is also just to give the members and those online a broad overview in terms of the National Spectrum Management Framework. And this is basically existing in most countries. We have got government spectrum, we've got commercial and non-government spectrum, which is issued to the telcos and the broadcasters, and to a large extent for short-range devices. So, Chair, that's basically just a slide to indicate that this kind of activities exist in most jurisdictions, and I think within SADC and on the continent, we are almost fully harmonized in terms of how do we use spectrum on the continent. Chair, in terms of the overview of the auction, as the Deputy Minister mentioned earlier on, we successfully auctioned the spectrum. We also then embarked on looking at how do we get other players into the market, and also looking at how do we deal with this high demand of spectrum against the demand for broadband services. And that was some of the core issues that how we designed the auction, and also to ensure that there is competition in the market. In this slide, Chair, is basically just a high-level process map, and hopefully the colleagues will certainly get this slides. Before we started the auction, we had to go into a pre-auction preparatory process where we had to do a full competition assessment of the market, what spectrum holdings exist currently, and what is required to make our current licensees competitive or at least credible in the spectrum environment. So we've done before the auction, we've done a competition assessment, a mobile broadband service inquiry, a spectrum valuation that we had to do to set reserve prices and also in terms of the auction design. We went through a couple of consultations in terms of information memoranda, as you can see on the slide on the block that's indicated here. We also had industry workshops, and we certainly had to take the industry in our confidence that we can run this auction and with the consultant that we appointed. We finally published a final invitation to apply in December 2021. We have received since then, since the publication of that invitation to apply, we received about 6 applications. That was Vodacom, MTN, Cell C, Liquid, Rain, and Telkom. So those are the 6 players that entered in the auction. Based on our auction design, we also had a pre-qualification phase where we published a list of the 6 qualified bidders on the 21st of February 2022. And also just to take everybody in our confidence, we had a mock auction. It was almost like a dummy auction. For training purposes, we had to bring our colleagues from the industry on board to ensure that they also understand the software. How do we go about the auction? And Chair, I must say this was in the middle of COVID, and we successfully managed to have this almost fully online auction. There was an intention for us to have an in-person auction, but I think it worked out quite well in terms of what the software could do for us remotely. In terms of just to come back to the auction itself, we had an opt-in auction where we allowed the smaller players, let me call it smaller players for now, or what we call tier 2 players, to enter into an auction where they can compete amongst themselves to get access to this valuable resource. Then after that, we went into the main auction, which ran from the 10th to the 17th of March 2022. The auction ran over 58 rounds, and those that qualified that could enter the auction, they then participated in the auction. And the last phase basically was the frequency assignment phase, where it was all in person phase that we had to allow operators, those that paid the most for the spectrum, to give them sort of a preferential treatment, to choose the allocation, or at least the location of the spectrum within the bands. So, Chair, we then subsequently issued the licenses. In this next slide, just briefly to touch on the issues, we issued the licenses to the successful bidders by the 10th of May 2022, and that was based on the committed auction fee, payment of the committed auction fee. And as Deputy Minister also alluded to the fact that for the 700-800 megahertz band, it was a proportionate payment due to the availability of the broadcasting spectrum at the time. But Chair, I think the Minister has set a deadline on the 31st of July, and I wanted to repeat what the Deputy Minister said, but that was the one deadline for all broadcasting services to be migrated below the frequency 694 in the current allocated broadcasting band. And then the second phase will be the 31st of December 2024 to have all analog assignments switched off, and whether it's below 694 and above, they all have to be switched off at that point in time. In terms of the licenses that was affected from the 1st of July 2022, we have issued, or at least subject the license to some coverage obligations, some throughput obligations in terms of speed. the social obligations, as I referred to earlier, and then some spectrum sharing obligations. The social obligations relating to various public institutions, we are about to finalize that process, Chair. We are meeting with the last operator this afternoon. That is in terms of zero-rating of government websites, so that the industry, or not necessarily the industry, but the public, do not pay for information of government services. So that is the .gov.za websites that we will basically have to, through a process, on board from the authority side. We also do have public benefit organizations that will obviously benefit from this zero rating of these public websites, and the connectivity of public institutions. Chair will come later on. There was a list of public institutions that were included in the auction, and operators, obviously, they were aware that they will have to connect public schools. There's some clinics and hospitals. There was also intention to connect libraries and police stations, but I think there is a different process for police stations, and lastly for traditional offices that we have to then also get the necessary data to finalize the obligation itself. In terms of the competition and reduction to cost to communicate, I think the important part for us was to allow operators to have the right amount of spectrum. And from an operator's point of view, I think there will never be enough spectrum for them to roll out their networks, and they will always complain that there is never enough spectrum. But I think they need to have sufficient spectrum, and for a sustainable operator is to exert sufficient pressure on competitors. It's an important aspect to have access to what we call low band spectrum, mid band, and also to a high band spectrum. So the combination will be 700, 800. For now, if I can use the example, mid band will be your 2.6 and between 1 gigahertz and 3 gigahertz, and the high band will be above 3 gigahertz. And in our case, it was the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum that's now been looked at as 5G services in other markets and also in South Africa. So just once again, I think we've done well in terms of the actual migration process, and that was concluded by the minister at the end of July. And I think from now on, for us from ICASA, we will possibly have to see how this will then impact the deployment of services, especially the sub 1 gigahertz bands. That is below 1 gigahertz, and the 700, 800 megahertz bands. That will basically then allow operators to deploy services more effectively in the deep rural areas. Chairperson, thank you. In terms of the pro content, we had to look at the auction in terms of two issues. We identified that we do have two dominant operators, Vodacom and MTN, and we had to do what we call a tier structure in terms of where they're dominant, and allow the smaller operators in terms of their definition of the tiering scheme to enter the auction first, and to ensure that they also become credible to compete with these dominant players. So, Chair, that was how the auction was designed from our side, to ensure that we do not leave the smaller players out of the auction. Otherwise, you might have seen a situation where the bigger operators will then take up all the spectrum. Further change in terms of the auction design, we, like I said, we imposed coverage obligations that were consistent with the promotion of competition by giving support to tier 2 operators to catch up. And whereas the tier 1 operators, Vodacom and MTN, what we imposed the obligation is to have an outside-in approach, starting with your rural areas and then come into the urban areas. Chair, and I think that will possibly realize once, now that they have access to all the 700 and 800 spectrum, which give you larger coverage and also allow you not to deploy too many sites. That will basically then minimize the cost for operators, and they can then proceed with rolling out the networks completely in South Africa. I think hopefully they'll cover this as soon as possible. They've got a 5-year period to cover what we call 97% of the country, or at least the population. But from the ICASA records and also our documents that we receive from them, they almost cover about 98% of the country. Anyway, but that's on 2G and 3G services and 4G services. So, Chair, we also introduced what we call spectrum caps, spectrum floors, to ensure that operators have comparable spectrum and in order to compete fairly in the market. So it was always an issue that some operators never had enough, and this process, or at least the auction process, allowed them to become competitive in the market. Chair, the results of the auction, as Deputy Minister also alluded earlier on, is we raised in the final stage of the auction just over, if you can see the second line there, over 14.4 billion. There are some issues that have been raised with the payment of the auction fees. The spectrum that's been acquired through the auction is also listed in this table, and you can see the prices on my file right hand side. Telkom 2.1 billion, Liquid 1,100 million, then Cell C 288 million, Rain 1.4 billion, MTN 5 billion, 5.1 billion, and then Vodacom 5.3 billion. So, Chair, they have paid the initial amount of the fees, and I think we have set a deadline for this payment since we now cleared the bands. There are some sporadic assignments that we believe is interference, and we treat that as interference, that they have to pay the outstanding fees by the end of October. So that will then realize the full amount of the 14 billion or 14 billion plus. In terms of the impact of the spectrum on competition and prices, the availability of coverage and capacity spectrum, I think that is a very important aspect, that they have sufficient spectrum to reduce the prices accordingly, and hopefully that will allow them to have a ripple effect on the consumer itself. The increase of number of players, Chair, and here again, I think the important part of this slide is to have this increase of number of credible players, so that they all have similar spectrum, so that they can compete in this market. The reduction of infrastructure rollout, which certain spectrum bands allow you to do, for especially the 700, 800, your cost of deployment becomes substantially less than the higher bands, which are they have very small coverage areas. So, Chair, I think that is basically the slide. In terms of the social obligation, Chair, if I can maybe move on to the social obligations. As I mentioned, that there are the zero rating of mobile content for public benefit organizations, including .gov.za websites, and that is something that the authority will impose, or at least that will start in the amended licenses, which will hopefully we can conclude that process in this quarter, or at least in the third quarter by the end of October. So, Chair, the license will be issued accordingly to include this obligation to zero rate those mobile content to public benefit organizations and .gov.za websites. If you can look at this slide, Chair, the social obligations and members, what we included in the ITA is about 18,000 schools, public schools, government clinics about 3,967, government hospitals 1,764. We also looked at unconnected police stations, but that is something that we consulted the department on, and that might be replaced by libraries. And then the traditional authority officers or the tribal officers, which is 8,241. But Chair, there's still some outstanding data that we are working on, and especially with the coordinates and where they are located, in which areas, and also the coverage areas within these operators. in terms of the connectivity obligations, as I said earlier on, we would like to see this at least the data implementation at minimum cost, or at least at no cost. So we have consulted with the operators. We are about to conclude that well, hopefully by the end of this week, and which we then have to make a presentation to council, and council will make the final decision based on our recommendation to the full council. The services cost at Chair, again, we're also looking at a zero cost for services for public service institutions. I think it's important that we do not get ourselves into commercial arrangements in terms of a PFMA, and we basically and that to avoid public service institutions to pay this service cost, Chair. We would like to completely stay away from any commercial arrangement with the operators. But in terms of the infrastructure costs, that once again, the operators will be obligated to provide this infrastructure at no cost, and they will connect the public service institution, and they will also be responsible to put the equipment to enable the licensee, at least the public service institution, to connect to the network. In terms of the IMT spectrum acquired through the auction, Chair, we released about 306 megahertz of spectrum, which is quite good from our side. There was only one unsold lot, and the reason for that unsold lot was because it was quite expensive. I think when the operators did their analysis, this 2 by 10 megahertz of spectrum in 800 megahertz became quite exorbitant in terms of the price of that. So, Chair, as some of the colleagues can recall, this lot was priced at around 1.4 billion rand, which I believe it was still reasonable from our side, and we thought that operators might take this unsold lot up. But we are moving into the second phase of our licensing process, but that's a discussion and consultation that we will embark on going forward. On this, the table on this slide, Chair, it gives you an indication what operators need to, or the amount, at least the percentage that operators need to contribute in terms of the connecting of public service institutions. So Telkom will have 14.9% based on their spectrum acquisition in auction. Liquid, they only got 4 megahertz of spectrum. They will have 1.3% of the obligations. Rain similar to 13.51%. MTN 33.7%. And then Vodacom 37.16%. Then lot 9 at the bottom is your unsold lot, which I referred to earlier on. Chair, just on the point that I wanted to make here is that we basically, from our side, when we designed the auction, also these obligations, it was really to support the SA Connect policy and to ensure that at least the public enjoy the benefit of the spectrum that will be released. This is just a table that gives you an idea of the numbers that operators will have to roll out. Public schools, again, like I said, there were about 18,000 of schools that we got from the line departments, government clinics, government hospitals, and also the unconnected police stations, which are now replaced by libraries and traditional authority offices. So this is basically just a slide that gives you a breakdown on the various aspects of at least the numbers that operators need to implement. Chair, in terms of additional obligations to enhance competition, I'm not too sure whether I'm still on track with my time. Can I proceed, Chair?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chairperson. And my apologies, it takes a bit of time. Then the additional obligations that to enhance competition, we look at what we call mobile virtual network operators. And here we insisted on having a 51% ownership by historically disadvantaged persons, Chair. And these are networks that do not necessarily have or at least operators that do not necessarily have a network, but they can piggyback on other operators. For example, Cell C, MTN, and Vodacom, they will provide this virtual network operators, which also will further then enhance the competition in the market, allow smaller players to come on board, and especially with our own people owning this kind of networks in the country. In terms of the coverage obligation, as I mentioned earlier on, it's an outside-in approach where MTN and Vodacom will have to cover 97% of the population. Other operators like Telkom and Rain, they will have to cover about 80% of the population over a period of 5 years. Chair, this is an obligation that we impose on the operators. Again, where spectrum has not been used effectively and efficiently, we also wanted to combine this with innovative the use of spectrum, especially with our rural communities, SMEs, and so on, where we say that if you do not use the spectrum effectively and efficiently, we will then impose this use it or share it condition. I know that the department in their spectrum policy talk about use it or lose it in that spectrum policy, but this is a kind of debate that is still ongoing at the moment, Chair. Thank you. In terms of the other initiative that I referred to earlier on to reduce the cost of communicate, ICASA has got a technology neutral licensing framework. And this allows operators to seamlessly and more aggressively move from one technology to a next technology. And as ICASA in general, we do not license for technology. We license the spectrum, and operators can then migrate to the latest and most advanced technologies, which reduce their burden. It also reduce the cost to enter the market with those new devices. The public then obviously enjoy the access to these devices. What we also experienced here in terms of satellite services, the latest devices and also satellites, especially low Earth orbit satellites and high throughput broadband satellites, the spectrum fees becomes quite exorbitant, and we are now looking at the feasibility of our spectrum fees and the formula also to reduce, because at the moment the satellite operators using our spectrum fee formula, the business case becomes non-feasible or unfeasible, and hence we are looking at the spectrum fees to ensure that does not translate into higher costs for our consumers. Chair, in terms of our end user subscriber charter amendment regulations 2023, we also basically embarked on the data expiry and rollover rules. That's in place at the moment, that data should not expire within a certain period of time, and to ensure that our consumers also do not lose their data to a large extent. And ICASA also further imposed consumer advisories by these operators. They need to ensure that the public and the industry is aware of their products and so on. Chair, in terms of the setting of standards, we are also continuously looking at emerging technologies that might also assist with lowering the cost and also in terms of effective and efficient use of spectrum. We have revised our equipment authorization regulations and our conformity assessment regulations. That is being finalized, and hopefully we will be able to implement that towards the end of this year. The emerging technologies, Chair, which is now on the horizon, I think the department did very well by presenting this to the ITU, or the International Telecommunications Union. So we're looking at IMT 2030, which is effectively the 60 services that we would like to see going forward. And those are things that is currently under development as we speak, and it will be presented at the World Radio Conference 23 in Dubai later this year. Chair, my humble apologies for the noise outside. This is something I can't control from my side. Then in terms of the spectrum management, as I mentioned, the Minister also were quite effective in terms of having this two-step approach on the DTT. I think there are countries now looking at this format and also this model to see how do they expedite their, at least making the spectrum available, what we call dividend one, the digital dividend one and dividend two. So Chair, I think we sort of give the industry and the continent and everyone else some ideas to see how can we do the two-step approach in terms of migration. And I think, Chair, as you might recall, and the colleagues and the members on the platform, is that there is a draft new generation spectrum policy that's out, which introduce other networks or other elements or provisions at least to foster competition in the market. We're looking at community networks that will be quite effective and efficient for us to involve the local communities in terms of owning some of these networks. Spectrum sharing, which is quite relevant in this market. In this market, we also need to look at spectrum trading and spectrum leasing. Now, these are some of the debates that the department will engage on, and then at least give ICASA some direction on what needs to go into a spectrum policy, or at least amending the law effectively. Chair, as ICASA, in terms of our next phase, we are planning the next phase of our IMT spectrum licensing process. Now, here, Chair, I think I just want to make the point is that we still have to do what we call a competition assessment post the auction. So we want to see what is the effect of the first auction and look at what is the competition aspects within this second phase post the auction. So, Chair, we are going through that process at the moment, and the intention is to onboard a consultant to assist us with the assessment, the spectrum valuation once again, and then obviously the design of the information, the invitation to apply, and also the auction itself. But Chair, here we will obviously have to be very creative and look at how do we bring the smaller players once again on board and make sure that they also do have access to the spectrum. What we recently have done, Chair, in April this year, we have released about 500 megahertz of in a lower 6 gig spectrum, which is for Wi-Fi services, which will then allow SMEs and smaller players to effectively roll out these Wi-Fi services. And this is quite conducive in terms of your local networks at home, will give you access to high throughput broadband services, and also prevent this congestion that most of us experience from time to time, as we experience in certain aspects in COVID and so on. So, Chair, we have released the lower 6 gigahertz band for Wi-Fi services, which again, our SMMEs can certainly make do of this and ensure that they roll out services to the underserved areas, and then also looking at communities that do not have access to services. We also implement our dynamic spectrum regime, that is your TV white spaces. We are also now investigating other bands to ensure that we be looking at other bands which can be implemented for dynamic spectrum access. Dynamic spectrum access is basically, it's a system that allow us to use spectrum that is dormant or sitting dormant somewhere, and it allow us to effectively and efficiently assign that spectrum to others that might be able to use it more effectively. We also introduced what we call a light licensing framework, but that is mostly in your higher bands, what we call the millimeter wave bands, the V and E band, the 60 gigahertz band, and the E band around about 70 and 80 gigahertz. So those are bands that licensed operators and your smaller players can use as a replacement for fiber connectivity, where it's very difficult to roll out a fiber network. Chair, I think I'm almost done with the slides. We also, at promoting competition, to reduce the cost to communicate, we're looking at once again to our call termination regulations. We are busy reviewing that at the moment. Within SADC, we're also looking at this home and away roaming to ensure that the communications cross-border to Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini is reduced, and so that at least we can do businesses seamlessly Chair. We also looking at other initiatives on the continent, especially under the African Free Trade Agreement, Smart Africa, and so on, which we not necessarily are direct members, but we are also following the discussion on the continent to ensure that there is at least the cost to communicate is lower on the continent, especially into South Africa. License spectrum for SMEs, Chair, we have licensed a few operators for fixed wireless access in what we call the C-band, 3.6 to 3.8. That was done some time ago, and we will now have to see how do we then look at this band, which is now also under discussion at the ITU, at the World Radio Conference, where this band might be upgraded to a mobile allocation. So, Chair, that's a debate that we can have in November this year, November, December, and we'll see what the outcomes of that will be. Just the last few ones, the number portability regulations, we reviewed our porting of numbers because we were concerned about some of the subscribers are complaining about they're not in control of the porting process, and the number portability really just allow subscribers to move from one operator, at least have a choice. If they're not satisfied with quality of service, the cost, they can move from one operator to another one. So we have reviewed this number portability regulations. The subscribers do have, as per the regulation now, to have full control on the porting process, and also we want to ensure that amongst operators that the porting process is more seamlessly and effective. In terms of promotion of innovation, Chair, we allow new technologies to be trialed on a short-term license in South Africa, and effectively this new term that's keep on coming up, regulatory sandboxing, allowing operators and also industry to test certain things, having joint initiatives to look at technologies, and also to make sure that whatever they want to bring in, it's going to be suitable and working in South Africa. We also do have enforcement functions in terms of our powers to seize electronic communications equipment. We also do conduct audits, investigating complaints, and impose penalties where necessary. Our standing committee, it's a CCC, and also we do have an alternative dispute resolution committee. In terms of our educational initiatives, we have educational campaigns to ensure that consumers understand their rights in terms of not only cost, but also the rights to access effective communications in this country. We do that with the GCIS, and there were a few campaigns that have already been done, and I think we're expecting some more to happen later this year. So in terms of the global and local collaboration, we actively participate with the department under their umbrella in the ITU, UPU, AU, R2, SADC, ICASA, and ICC, and also the African Free Trade Agreement. We also do have what we call a 5G forum, which is an industry collaboration where we have the sector together to look at the newer technologies looking forward, and we obviously have to now start looking at the 6G and the IMT 2030 going forward. Chair, this is the last concluding remark from my side. I think I'm going to skip the slide, but access to additional spectrum enables network operators to optimize network deployments, improve coverage, increase capacity, and enhance the quality of service. These benefits can lead to cost savings in the long run and a more efficient use of resources. And access to additional spectrum can have a positive impact on cost of data for consumers by fostering competition, improving network efficiency, expanding coverage, enabling technology announcements, and influencing government policies. As carriers leverage additional spectrum resources to enhance their services, consumers are more likely to benefit from lower data prices and improve access to high quality services. Chair, I think if I can conclude here at this point in time is that we still have to see the benefits. I think operators will tell you that it's possibly too early to see the benefits. But from our point of view, Chair, I think the obligations that we impose on operators, we are now in the process to give them timelines, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, to ensure that they constantly roll out these obligations in the underserviced areas, and also to ensure that the cost to communication is reduced effectively. Chair, I'm going to stop at this point in time and basically also see if my colleagues are on the call yet. Otherwise, Chair, we're willing to, and we can respond to questions and maybe points of clarification, Chair. Thank you.
I must just say, Chair, which is a very unfortunate point. This presentation that was shared here, we don't have as the department and as the ministry. It was never shared with us. We've been trying to get hold of it. Until at this point, I don't have it. So I just thought that I must make that point, Chair. But otherwise, ICASA is done, Chair. Thank you.
No, thank you, Deputy Minister, for raising that point. It's very important, maybe as part of the responses from ICASA, they would have to deal with that because it is a serious oversight. Because there has to be an alignment as well as the strategic objectives of the department should also inform, especially in relation to issues that are related to social responsibilities and so on. So they will have to tell us if they are declaring their outright and absolute independence by not doing what they are supposed to do. Members, here now is the presentation. I would like to invite the members of the select committee to engage with ICASA on this presentation. It's a long presentation and it has a lot of content entailed in it. And as you know, that our lives have become quite very connected to issues of connectivity. So the critical nature of the task of ICASA is it's a mammoth task because we live in a unitary state, but this country is predominantly rural, and you find that issues of coverage are a huge, huge, huge challenge to date. Out of the thousands of schools that were mentioned here, the majority of those schools, some of them are in the margins of society, and the issue of coverage is really a frustration. And I'm sure you will all agree with me that during the outbreak of COVID, when many students were expected to study online, those who couldn't became disadvantaged instantaneously were those that are actually located in rural areas because the schools were found wanting. There was no way that there was an option for them to study online. But also generally, you know, the service providers take time to get into the rural areas when there's a breakage or batteries stolen or cables taken away. But even there, the instability of the network and the signal is a serious issue, which disadvantages people in the rural communities. And I speak because I reside in these communities as well. I know exactly the frustration that we go through, that sometimes for 2 weeks, there's no network whatsoever. And this brings misery to the lives of the people because we have become sort of reliant as well for communications to the signal and to the network. And therefore, it is no longer an issue of a privilege, actually. It's a right to be connected and to have a good signal. That's the point where we should be. And ICASA needs to be very firm on all those who have the license to provide the service to ensure that ultimately that actually happens. We are a country that is supposedly a well-managed economy. On issues like this, investment on the infrastructure that must ensure coverage. Actually, it should be forced and it should be brought forward. It can't be something that must be spread, that maybe by 2030 we will have. You know, when we electrified the country in the new dispensation, when we put our foot down to ESCOM, that we wanted the rapid electrification of all areas, we only gave them 5 years. And that was done. There were lights all over. So if we can have a rapid assurance of that there is signal, there's network, and people have access, you know, to the net in a manner that it's not something that is a substandard. Like with speed is good, everything is actually upside-cop, if I may put it that way. So that's what we require here. I'm trying to wait for the hands from the members so that then we can then engage with this presentation. So we appreciate this presentation. And as I had said, it is very good that we are interacting with you so that we can be seized with all the challenges that flow, particularly to the communities that have suffered as a result of the points that I'm making of a weak signal and sometimes a total shedding when insofar as a network is concerned. It's something that has been under-communicated, you know. Long before there was the electricity load shedding, we had a problem of a signal that is totally not there in certain areas. And I think ICASA, you have every capacity to ensure that you put pressure on those that you have given licenses, because they had made a commitment that they will do exactly what we are talking about, and they are not doing it. And the other aspect is the issue of the expense associated with data. I think it has reached a level of not an abuse, I would say a brutal exploitation of the poorest of the poor. Our country is one of the few that charges exorbitant pricing when it comes to data. And the brutality of it is that, you know, we are a country that has high level of unemployment, and people who seek employment have to communicate through, you know, these services, and they require a data that is reasonable in terms of price, accessibility, and so on. So when you allow an escalation, you are creating a problem, you are closing down the majority of our people. Data is new money, and it's not supposed to be so expensive. These companies would still remain very profitable, but we believe that they are getting away with murder with the pricing levels of data and airtime. It's uncomparable. It's incomparable altogether with other, you know, middle-sized economies like ours. So it's something that you need to put your foot down. I mean, also the issue that you buy data and it expires. Why something that doesn't get rotten should expire? It doesn't make sense. It's just a way of, if you have bought data, you must use it until it's finished. You can't say by such and such a date, you terminate it, even if your balance was still good enough for you to continue. It doesn't make sense in a country like ours with the background that we have. I think those things must come to a stop. It should not be allowed. It's against the very ethos of a developmental state. So members, Amanda, can you assist me with the hands? I'll come back again to some of the points that I wish to raise with ICASA as well. But this was just more like saying we appreciate the presentation. It is really invoking some serious questions on the part of us as public representatives and what we expect from ICASA. Amanda, can you give me the highlight of the hands that we have there? Do we have hands or there are no hands?
Chairperson, it's Karin Visser. My hand is up.
It was,
Your hand is
apologies, Chair.
noted.
It's first Honorable Nana, Honorable Fisa, and then Honorable Mabato. Mukause. First Honorable Nana, then Honorable Fisa, then Honorable Mukause.
My
Okay.
hand is up. My hand is up,
Oh,
Honorable.
oh, sorry, Chair. I thought it was Honorable Mukause. It says Constance as Afo. Then Honorable Mutise.
So Mukausa doesn't have a hand up.
No, Chair. It's just the name that's
Okay,
on the platform.
so we have 3 honorable members. We have Honorable Nana, Honorable Fisher, and Honorable Modise.
Correct, Chair.
Okay, in that order, honorable members, Honorable Nana, the floor is all yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Twanini, and greetings to everyone. It's cold in the Eastern Cape, terribly cold. Firstly, you have touched on a couple of things, Twanini, that were really bothering me, and first being connectivity with your current networks, the current service providers, your Telkom, Vodacom, MTN, what's this other one? Cell C. So, and you are so correct that there is tremendous underinvestment by some of these service providers, by some of these networks in rural areas. I can tell you now, as you know, that my home is in Alice. It is a known fact in Alice that when it's load shedding, if your mobile carrier is MTN, forget about it. You won't have connectivity. So from where I am sitting, and the strange part, Chairperson, is that if you are on Vodacom, you will still be connected. You know what I mean? You can still make calls and receive calls. And in my layman's analysis, it talks to underinvestment by some of these networks. And I am particularly singling out MTN. If you go the eastern part of the Eastern Cape, which is your old Transkei, Port St. John's, Hill, if it's load shedding, forget about it. There will be no connectivity, particularly with MTN. Now, I would want to check with ICASA, to what extent are you able to address this? Because it can be that 1 or 2 service providers or network providers are disadvantaging South Africans in the manner in which MTN does. And I'm very sorry to single them out. I'm not putting them on the spot, but unfortunately is the truth. And the truth is Vodacom is a lot better than MTN, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I would want to check with ICASA. What is it that you are doing or supposed to do to ensure that mobile service providers service all areas without exception? The second issue is on the proliferation of SIM cards. There is there is a practice out there of SIM cards sold for R1. At first, you would buy a SIM card for 29 Rand with airtime. It then went down to R1, a SIM card. Some of these network providers these days are actually issuing out SIM cards for free with 5 Rand or 10 Rand airtime in it. And South Africans are taking advantage of the situation. Every time I meet people with bibs giving out SIM cards, I simply take it, use the 10 Rand, and chuck it away. Mind you, that SIM card has now been recorded under my name. Again, I'm calling it a senseless, from where from my standpoint, it's a reckless business practice, because we've got a RICA law in the country that is supposed to be followed to the letter. And here are service providers issuing out willy-nilly SIM cards, and those SIM cards are registered under people's names. What impact does this have? ICASA, what impact does this practice have insofar as the enforcement of the RICA law is concerned? And thirdly, coming closer to what you've been called to present today, which is on spectrum licensing. I would like to know which guarantees you will give South Africans that these spectrum licenses that you were talking about, what measures have you put in place to ensure that not only the well-connected few to the governing party benefit from the scheme? What measures are in place to ensure that deserving South Africans will benefit from the scheme, whether they carry a green membership card, a blue membership card, a red membership card? It should be irrelevant. And lastly, there has been litigation around the spectrum licensing. How far is that process? Have you been able to meet? Have you been able to resolve any hindrances insofar as legal matters are concerned? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
No, thank you, Honorable Nana. I now give the opportunity to Honorable Fisser.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. And I don't want to repeat the same complaints, but I allude with what you have said about connectivity, and also Honorable Melinda. I also want to add that most of Northwest is most of the time without signal and without connectivity, even in times like when we've got a real crisis and we need connectivity, there's nothing available. We do not have any telecom lines anymore. The lines are simply stolen, and the poles also, there's nothing left. So we are really depending on MTN, Vodacom and those places, those companies to provide us with connectivity, which they don't. My main concern today to share with you is that I received complaints from the vernacular radio stations in Northwest. And it's a substantial number of them. I tried now, but because of connectivity that I myself had this morning to connect, I cannot open my screen. I have to work from my telephone in a car away. I drove to find signal just to get connected. I've got a substantial number of vernacular radio stations that those licenses were refused to be renewed for some or other reason. But these radio stations are the lives of our rural people. Our rural people in our villages, in every area has its own way of speaking, of talking, of sharing humor and stuff like that. And this is now simply taken away from them. And there is no way that they have to force to listen to other radio stations of which the connectivity is not always well. They came with complaints to me and said, can we please do something and request ICASA to look into the matter and to see what structures we can work out to get these radio stations going again. I know it costs money, and I do not know if ICASA knows how difficult it is for rural areas to get people to support with funding, stuff like that. What is coming from their side and from the government side so that we can maintain these voice of the people and the way that we communicate, even municipalities and all these people are communicating through the radio stations with important messages to the people out there. Please, can we do something about that? Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Officer. Karen. We will now ask Honorable Debo Homodiza.
No, thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to honorable members. Let me start by greeting the Deputy Minister. Chair, first, before I ask my question, I just want to find out why why ICASA they didn't send this presentation to the department. And also, DM, if next time ICASA is doing the same to present the report before us without presenting it to you, next time, Chair, I will ask you, let us not entertain it, because we don't know how they are operating. Yeah, let me go to, but they must tell us what is the reason why they didn't submit to the department. Maybe there is a reason. Let me go to my question, Chair. My question is on the auctioning of the spectrum. Did ICASA set aside a percentage for small, micro, and medium enterprise? Or is that something still going to be done in future? In other words, how do you ensure that the small business enterprise enter in the electro communication market? The second one, it's in your assessment, what is the percentage of coverage of telecommunication services in the rural area by licensed operators? Because really, people who are staying in the rural area, when I go home, I still struggle with coverage. Like other members have mentioned, that in the rural area, there is a serious crisis of communication in the rural area. Those are the two questions that I wanted to ask, Chair.
No. Thank you very much, Honorable Modisa. Now, this is where we are, councillors. Indeed, we are very much interested to hear from you, because this presentation does not indicate in real terms the statistics. And it would be therefore very important that perhaps when we call you again, you actually give a proper account with really informed statistics that are going to give us a true picture and a true reflection of what is happening on the ground. Again, I want to repeat that the reduction of cost of communication comparison year to year, we would like to see that, and I would like you to talk to it. Then on transformation, we are a country that we all know that in terms of the ownership of the means and the factors of production, and communication is very central and key to this because it has become a cardinal pillar of both the factors and the means. So it is important, therefore, that when it comes to the ownership, including of the service providers, I will make an example with an issue with Cell C. I know that Cell C, 60% of it used to be owned by a foreign entity, but it got diluted and rediluted from 40 to 25, from 25 to 15. And I believe, for instance, that in that context, there must have been a violation of your very same regulations and stipulations. So it's important that you talk to that, because that means then that it's a reversal. Because CellSouth used to own 40%, and CellSouth was a company which is owned by the Africans, you know, the native South Africans. But now everything has now changed. I'm using the smallest company or a smallest service provider compared to the other three. So transformation, which new players have been introduced, and would like you to quantify that particular transformation in numbers and percentages. And then insofar as competition, what barriers have been addressed? Because there are critical barriers in terms of competition. You need to be very firm, because when there's a healthy competition, it also helps the situation to reduce, you know, the cost to communication, to reduce the price of data, to reduce the price to make the call, to reduce the price of airtime. Then closing the digital divide, which areas are covered in 2G, 3G, and 4G? And what are the plans with timeframes to close the digital gap? It's very important that you deal with this, and all these questions that I'm asking are actually related. Now, insofar as the issue that has been raised in terms of what you are presenting now, my understanding is that initially there was an agreement between yourselves as the line and the line function department that you had said you will employ a trajectory that says use it or lose it. But now I see that things have changed. You are saying now use it or share it. So for me, that means the big players will latch on the spectrum and not roll out the social obligations. And these social obligations are very key because they are addressing challenges of the most distressed areas of our country. So if you are going to allow a situation where the social obligations are going to be betrayed by service providers that are accountable to you primarily, it's going to be problematic. So it's important that we make a recommendation for the enforcement that if those obligations are not honored by a certain period, that spectrum must be taken back. I think you need to be clear on that. And then the very last thing that I wish to say to you is that it is worrying that as the spectrum is now available fully as broadcasters have cleared the above 800 band. What ICASA is not saying is when they will commence with these social obligations in terms of connectivity. So you see, this issue of social obligations is very central. And I think we will have to, before we go to the recess, to call you again, to come back so that you give meat to what I would ordinarily call it an incomplete presentation, because it lacks some detail. And the devil is in the detail for us to see that we are really making progress in the country insofar as transformation, the ownership of the means and the factors of it. We can't afford to say these mobile companies and telecommunication companies, all of them were actually established in the New South Africa. For me, I would have preferred that they are actually in the majority owned by the previously disadvantaged South Africans. And I think you, as an independent communication authority of South Africa, which is an instrument of the new dispensation, that should be your obligation to ensure that that actually happens. And lastly, with what Honorable Modise has said, I am very keen to know if the auction has already occurred. Because some of these things, they happen, and yet they happen they are not communicated properly to a point wherein they are put at the center of the public discourse, so that it is a very open and robust, aggressive campaign to say that there is this auction that is going to happen, because an auction like that actually talks to us using it to get into the object of transformation. So when it's done in a manner that is subdued, it suggests that there are certain targeted, perhaps, groupings that must actually be the beneficiaries of that auction. I can tell you now, if I were to ask you, how many rural entities have benefited from that? You will find that all those, if it has already happened, it will be urban fellows. You need to deal with that. Things cannot continue in that way. So I would like you now to give you an opportunity to respond to the questions which have been raised by the members. I see a hand of Constance. Is that part of the team from ICASA?
Sorry, it's my legacy hand.
Okay. Oh, you are also Constance in other platforms.
No, it's my daughter's.
I see. All right. Let's give now the opportunity to ICASA to respond, and we will allow then the DG and the DM, if he's still in the platform, to come at the end of your responses, maybe also for them to say something. ICASA, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just want to check if I'm still audible.
We can hear you and we can see you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, let me first start with profusely apologize for the delay or whatever delay it is in delivering of the presentation. Chair, I will investigate with the CEO what transpired, because the presentation normally it gets approved by council, and we normally send it through to the department. I will certainly look at the timeframes and so on, Chair. I will certainly investigate that. But I really want to use the opportunity to apologize on behalf of the authority and the colleagues on the call about the delay in distributing the presentation. Chair, we will certainly follow up on this and ensure that this doesn't happen in future once again. So, Chair, I've got my colleagues, Mr. Norman Giddy, also on the call, and one or two other colleagues that will basically respond to certain of the inputs that we have. Chair, in terms of the basically what I think some of the questions that's been raised by the honourable members is how do we address some of these issues in terms of enforcement and compliance. Chair, throughout the process, we always identify the monitoring and compliance issues as a huge risk. So, Chair, we do have a monitoring unit that monitor certain areas throughout the country. In fact, as we speak now, that we basically monitor these bans that has been released now, and so on. So, Chair, we do have a compliance unit and a monitoring unit that does the compliance check and ensure that there is no, in fact, in certain areas where there is limited connectivity. So we do have also publish on a regular basis our outputs, and those are well gazetted by the authority. So, Chair, and I think I'll take up the offer from yourself and also the colleagues on the call, the honourable members, to ensure that we put in some more meat into the presentations. We were not sure how far we could go with the detail of data and so on. We have some slides that we wanted to present, but I think in terms of the length of the presentation, it was going to take us some time to go through that. The other point that was raised, Chair, by the honourable member was on the SIM cards. Yes, we certainly have identified that as a problem. Just last week we met with the Department of Justice, who is the owner of or at least the custodian of the RICA law. And Chair, we are looking at a joint effort to ensure that this, let me call it, the RICA SIM cards that's been used, what we call almost plastic roaming, that these SIM cards are not abused and not being distributed as freely as it happens. So hence we basically from our side, we got to a point where we requested operators to not to include numbers, at least to sell these SIM cards numberless, so that the RICA needs to happen with somebody that's present at the time, and also whether that person can be positively identified. We are also, we just amended our numbering plan regulation to ensure that we can possibly identify individuals on these SIM cards, because we also met with the banking sector, because there's a lot of issues within the banking sector around SIM cards that have been ported and RICA, which they can't trace. So, Chair, we have engaged with our banking sector, SABRIC, to ensure that we also discuss these things going forward. Chair, that in fact, in terms of the RICA law, with the Department of Justice, we are busy coordinating meetings to discuss how do we ensure that this law gets implemented as effective as we can. ICASA has got a certain mandate, and the Department of Justice has got also their own mandate in terms of the RICA law. So, Chair, we just need to see how do we then at least do some handshaking on some of the activities and have a joint coordination on these RICA SIM cards, which we believe it becomes a massive problem within the South African context. In terms of which let me call it South Africans, we need to ensure which South Africans will benefit from this auction scheme. Chair, that ends we build in this auction. We build in a process to ensure that we benefit all South Africans, and also to ensure that there is some transparent process to ensure that we do not leave anyone behind, and basically also to ensure that we connect the unconnected. We are in our auction, and I think, Chair, you asked the question whether this already happened. The auction that happened in March last year, so the spectrum has been awarded and assigned to the operators. The question for us now, and at least from our side, we need to ensure the enforcement of the license terms and conditions that was imposed on the operators, to ensure that we basically have a seamless process in terms of rollout, The operators do have coverage obligations, which I alluded to earlier on, that they need to start with the deep rural areas, Chair. And this is the obligation that we're imposing on the regulators, or not on the regulators, but on the operators. So they need to ensure that they start from the outside in. And if I say outside in, I'm meaning from your deep rural areas into the cities. Chair, we also do have some stats that in fact, slides that where operators obviously, depending on the cost of the service, they have rolled out quite substantially in the country, especially the three main operators, Vodacom, MTN, to a large extent, Telkom, Cell C, Liquid, and Rain. They have rolled out extensively throughout the country. The question, I think, the bigger question for us is the affordability, and this is what we have to see, that this prices gets driven down, and that we do not have this absorbent pricing on data and so on. So, Chair, that's a process that's ongoing at this point in time. We are about to issue the amended licenses to include these obligations and to ensure that we can now, beyond October, enforce these obligations to ensure that operators adhere to the compliance of these license terms and conditions. Chair, I think the honourable member also raised the issue about the radio stations that operate effectively in another band. In terms of the auction was developed around certain bands, what we call international mobile telecommunication spectrum, where your radio stations are sort of assigned and operating on spectrum that is in your radio, or at least the sound broadcasting bands. So, Chair, in terms of that, yes, we are in the process of licensing additional radio stations, and I will also then maybe just have to check with my colleagues whether the Northwest, I think, as identified as one of the areas, and it's not only Northwest, I think it's throughout the country. There are various pockets of disconnectivity of some of these radio stations. So we went through an entire exercise with the ITU to see how do we optimize the current radio frequency bands for broadcasting services, especially for sound broadcasting. And that exercise has been completed, and we basically will go ahead with licensing additional radio stations going forward. One of our honourable members raised the issue also about the department's the presentation, Chair, but there was no intention from our side to not to send and I think it's unfortunate that I actually have to go back to the CEO and the colleagues to understand what exactly happened with the submission of the presentation. In terms of the next phase of the auction, Chair, we and honourable members, Deputy Minister, the DG, we are looking at how do we design not only the auction, but I think the next licensing process to ensure that spectrum gets released as soon as possible. And with that, we will obviously have to consider the inputs. We have to consider the submissions that's made to the authority. We generally go out on a massive information request, normally what we publish as what we call information memoranda. And information memoranda basically will then collect data. We consider inputs from the subscribers. We consider inputs from the industry, and if there's an input from various organizations within South Africa, to ensure that we cover all bases on this. So, Chair, set aside, yes, is something that we can consider, or depending on the inputs that we receive, and also depending on policy direction from the minister. We will then have to look into the set aside and see how do we effectively cater for set asides at least, and there are various of these models that's been done across the world. For example, in the US, that we also looked into. There's other on the continent itself. I think there's Ghana, Nigeria. They certainly looked at these set asides for SMEs, and that's something that we, as an authority, certainly will consider. in terms of what we released, as I mentioned in one of the slides, is that we have released what we call Wi-Fi spectrum, which is not in fact that does not attract any charges for using that spectrum in smaller communities and those services. So, Chair, I believe that that opened an avenue for small, medium, and macro enterprises to ensure that they can also begin to roll out services in those underserviced areas. In terms of the percentages of coverage in rural areas, as the mobile operators report to us on an annual basis or biannual basis, we publish what we call a state of sector report. And Chair, we will certainly share that information with you. As you said, I just mentioned, we will have another follow-up on this. So the state of sector report, which has now been used by many, not only in South Africa, but across the world, to look into the status of rollout in South Africa, or at least communication services in South Africa. So the state of sector report will certainly assist us, and we can certainly update some of the slides to give you a good sense of the stats that cover the deep rural areas and also those most underserviced areas. In terms of transformation, Chairperson and members, transformation for ICASA is non-negotiable, Chair. I think we made that point very clear, that some operators want to come into the country and not adhering to some of our transformation aspirations, or at least our regulations. So, Chair, as you can remember, it was in the media. There were some satellite operators that want to come into the country, but if they cannot conform or at least comply with the transformation aspects of our regulations, Chair, there's unfortunately that those type of services that we cannot introduce, but we certainly have to ensure that they comply with our local conditions. Transformation from the ICASA side is non-negotiable, Chair, if I can put that point across. Chair, if you allow me to also just go into the issue about the use it or lose it debate or at least a question that was asked. Chair, one of the reasons why we had this use it or share it input is that the licensees in this auction that concluded in March last year, they do have a license for about 20 years. And one of the reasons for that is, Chair, that ICASA can always embark, and the law allows us to investigate, go through the process, and to a large extent then allow these operators to either return the spectrum to ICASA or share it with others. And Chair, we also believe that might be a point that we will certainly investigate from our side. Chair, they do have a limited amount of time to implement this use it or lose it or use it or share it. So we do have a 5-year period. If they do not use the spectrum within that 5-year period, the authority can certainly investigate and not affecting the customers, Chairperson. We basically will then look, investigate further, and then we also do have the mandate to withdraw some of the spectrums that was not used effectively and efficiently. The Chair, we will certainly, that is something that we can certainly investigate over the 5-year period, or at least after the 5-year period, once these things does not happen within the license terms and conditions. Chair, I think, and I certainly take your advice and also the members' advice that I think we possibly have to come back with more detail to give you at least more substantive information in terms of the numbers, in terms of coverage, like I said, there are some maps and detail that we receive on an annual basis from the operators, which we can then include in the subsequent update of our presentations. Chair, just to once again, in terms of communication of our licensing processes, Chair, this is one of the things that we certainly identified as a massive issue, and when we start the process, that was also always top of mind. Our chairperson was always on radio, always on TV, explaining to the industry where we are, what's the status, and we did publish regular updates. But I believe that there is room for improvement. We can certainly address some of the things if there's a lack of communication, and to ensure that not only the ones that understand or participate in this process, but also that the general public also understand where we are with these processes and what it means for the public in general. Chair, and once again, I think through our communication, we would like to ensure that these processes are all fair, open, and transparent. Chair, I think, Chair, if you allow me, I just want to see whether some of our colleagues on the platform or on the call at this point in time, if you allow them to make also further inputs on the questions or at least the comments. Chair, I will take the lead from yourself, whether they can go ahead with further inputs. Thank you, Chair.
No, certainly we can allow them, especially you were expecting the CEO, Peter?
Chair, again, my apologies for this, Chair. We have a current council meeting, and there's a bit of a crisis meeting at this point in time. I'm not sure whether the CEO will join us, but we have Advocate Norman Giddy on the call, which we can also respond to some of the questions, Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, no, it's fine. The advocate can go ahead. If the advocate wants to talk, if he wants to do any additional explanation to the questions.
Norman, can you hear us?
Yes. What is his designation?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. My name is Norman Giddy from ICASA. I'm not so sure if you are able to see me from the camera because I don't see anything from my side. Okay.
Okay, we can see you and we can hear you, Norman. If you can also tell us your designation, Norman, the advocate.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I am the Executive for Policy Research and Analysis. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and afternoon to the Deputy Minister and the colleagues and the DG. I think there was a question which was posed with respect to the litigation, whether there is any litigation on the spectrum licensing. Chair, we no longer have any litigation. The litigation that we had has since been resolved, and that is what paved the way for the spectrum auction that we then successfully concluded that the Councillor Zimri was talking about. Chair, there was a question about the impact on load shedding. I should indicate that ICASA Council have established a council committee to investigate the impact of load shedding with respect to the ICT services. The committee has then undertaken some consultation, and the aim is then to publish a notice of intention to conduct an inquiry on the impact of load shedding, as well as the regulatory relief that the authority can then come up with in order to address the challenges that are then faced by the operators. I should hasten to indicate, Chair, that we also, as Councillor Zimbre has indicated, we also conduct the quality of service monitoring, and the Executive for Engineering and Technology is also here. You might also want to expand. And in the main, we do conduct the test, monitoring the quality of service, issues of the drop call, issues of whether or not people are able to make calls or to retain calls. And once we then conduct that monitoring exercise, we then share that report with the operators for them to then come up with a remedial action with respect to the challenges that we have identified. Chair, with respect to the expiry of data, I should indicate the regulations in place, the end user subscriber regulation, and we had conducted a review of those regulations in light of the contents that were received from stakeholders with respect to the issue. What the authority has then resolved as of March 2023 was that there would be a need for further consultation.
Chairperson, we can't hear.
I think he has been kicked out by the system, or he's still there. Norman?
Yes, Honorable Chair.
Please carry on. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yes, I think I got cut. I am not so sure if I must then repeat the response with respect to expiry of data, Chair, or if you did get that.
What is start from announcing the date and then go forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. What I was indicating was that we have the end user and subscriber charter regulation that seeks to deal with the issue of the expiry of data. We have reviewed those regulations in light of the contents which were then raised by the stakeholder with respect to the expiry rules. What we have resolved to do as the authority was that we need further consultation so that we can address the issue. And that decision was communicated in March 2023. And that is what we are then going to be doing moving forward, to look into the issue further. Chair, I think there was also a question on the what barriers have we addressed. Councillor Zimri, when he was making the presentation, he then outlined the competition assessment that we have done as the authority, which then informed the design of the auction. Because that auction in the main was then to deal with the competition concerns and ensure that we have the credible operators post the auction. So one of the issues was access to spectrum, and we had to ensure that we then address that issue in our design. Hence, Councillor Zimri was talking about tier 1 and tier 2 operators, and also the issue of the minimum portfolio of the spectrum that each operator needed for them to be credible. So that is one of the issues that we have addressed. Chair, We also have the facilities leasing regulation, which regulation then provides a framework wherein the operators can then request to have access to facilities of the other operators so that they can then provide their services. Chair, I think those are the issues that I was able to capture, but we also have our colleagues, Philemon Milife, the executive for engineering and technology, as well as Owen Utlanga, the senior manager for market regulation, to then deal with some of the issues that we might have left out. Through you, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Chairperson, can I see if there are any further input from our colleagues?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair, Honorable Chair. Good afternoon, the Honorable Deputy Minister, DG, the Honorable Committee members. My name is Philemon Molefe, and I'm the Executive Engineering and Technology from ICASA. I would like to add, Chair, from when Tategidi has left off. In particular, just to provide some context in terms of the quality of service monitoring. Yes, indeed, we have published at ICASA the End User Subscriber Service Charter regulations. Amongst the others is to prescribe the minimum quality of service standards which the operators should offer to the subscribers. And then those prescribed quality of service parameters, ICASA on a quarterly basis monitors the quality of service across the provinces. Just to give some indications, last financial year, ICASA monitored for quality of service 8 provinces, and then for this current for the next financial year, then ICASA will be covering the entire 9 provinces within the country. In principle, if the operators are not adhering to the prescripts of the regulations, they are required to submit the mitigation or corrective plans to the authority, be it the quality of service is due to poor coverage or to no coverage at all. So they are supposed to submit those mitigation plans, which includes the number of sites, if additional sites are required, that they need to roll out. And then thereafter, ICASA will, as and when, based on the plans which were submitted, will monitor the progress in terms of how far are they in terms of correcting the quality of service, especially in poor, where there's poor coverage. And in most cases, it's in the rural areas. Chair, yeah, I will pause there, Chair. Thank you.
DM, you want to come in? I see another hand of a councillor.
Okay, I'll come after that.
Is there another councillor who wanted to come in, or is that a legacy hand? Owen.
Owen is one of our senior managers dealing with competition matters. Maybe if you can allow him. You can also wait for the DM to come in first, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, Owen, go ahead. The DM will make a summation.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I think on the issue which I wanted to touch on is the issue of high prices, concern which has been raised. So it's a sentiment which we share as ICASA that the broadband prices are still out of reach of most of our people. So what we have been trying to do as far as that aspect is concerned, maybe before I touch into that, let me maybe highlight how the pricing in the market works, so that at least then we can appreciate then the interventions which ICASA have been trying to do in order to deal with those issues. So that two broad types of pricing are in the market. Of course, standard prices, and those are prices which then remain flat, and basically they are faced by those consumers who consume data out of bundle. And then we have then promotions, of which these are normally faced by consumers who are in bundle. So if then when you buy data, any bundle which you buy of data, then it means basically you're consuming data in bundle, of which it means you're enjoying those promotions. So promotions tend to be very much cheaper as compared to the standard tariffs. And from our assessment of the market, we have seen that a lot of our people actually they're in form of a bundle, which then makes their effective rate of consumption of that data way lower than ideally if then they're consuming the data out of bundle, which then are the standard prices. So most of the work which have seen, which have done comparison between South Africa and our peers, has tend to really focus on standard prices, or of which if then you focus on standard prices, we compare poorly as compared to our peers. But if you then look at what is the effective rate, what is the actual prices which our people are facing who are consuming prices based on promotions and in bundle, you find that we compare actually very favorably, I mean, as far as our peers is concerned. So hence, as part of our initiative, of course, to communicate as ICASA, one of the things which we've been trying to do is to deal with the input cost. So if we're looking at the input cost, one of the issues which actually drive the data cost is the cost of deployment of assets. So hence, as ICASA, we've been trying to say, let's allocate spectrum, because spectrum is a big driver of those input costs, which what we have done. And then the other issue also which we had to deal with was the issue of to say, if then we've got operators who don't have funds to deploy assets, then how can they take advantage or piggyback on the already existing infrastructure, which are duplicating it? Hence, Norman earlier on spoke to the issue of facilities leasing, which then allows you to say, if you come into the market, whether a new entrant or a small entrant who doesn't have enough funds, then you can be able to piggyback, you can be able to lease, to save your customers through the network or the assets of another operator. Of what that does now is it reduces the barriers to entry for either new entrants and also for small operators. So after we've addressed the input cost, one of our journey in terms of addressing the cost to communicate now, we then go to the retail space, where now we say, do we need now to go and then regulate the actual prices? But what we have seen so far on the report which you produced, there's a report which is called the biannual tariff analysis, of which this is actually a very long report. I think the latest version, which you published last week, is about 125 pages, of which this tells you all the services and products which have been launched by operators which are in the market. So that's the report which you use to track actually the impact of our interventions at the input level, to see whether they're bearing fruit at the retail level, of which if you follow then the journey as portrayed by that report, you see that actually data prices have been actually going lower from where we had standard prices, which are almost about 160 Rand per 1 gigabyte monthly data, to now I think the highest is almost 99 Rand, of which people who actually take advantage of promotions which are offered in the bundle rates, their data prices for 1 gig can go to as low as 55 Rand per gigabyte. And also there's been a launch of a lot of products which are also aimed at alleviating the cost to communicate. For example, now you can have data which is actually targeted for the type of service which you want to use for. For example, you can have data only for WhatsApp chatting. You can have data for VoIP calling. You can have data for streaming. Of which, if you look at all those prices, the effective prices that are way lower than the standard rates, which are then used to benchmark or maybe to compare us with our peers. So that's one of the issues which I also wanted to highlight. I think the last issue as well is what has been alluded on by Councillor Zimri, to say one of the conditions which you have put is that then the operators who were successful in the last spectrum allocation, they should come actually are carrying some NVN because we've seen that one of the biggest barriers to entry into this market is that it's capital intensive. So if we look at our people who basically are historically disadvantaged and they don't have a lot of access to capital, we saw that it's like the easiest entry for them to enter into this market and also play a role into this market is when they enter almost at a reseller level. Then it gives them that entry without having to face the high cost of infrastructure or network deployment, of which when they enter into that market, then they can provide services, of which during the initial years, they can actually raise capital then to deploy their own network and infrastructure, based on that, because actually the kind of capital needed for our people to be able to actually play an active role into that market requires a lot of capital. So those are some of the initiatives which have been doing as ICASA to make sure that there is transformation and also to make sure that the cost of data continue to fall in. Yes, it's falling, but not as fast as we want to be. But with these interventions which we have put now, we hope that it will fall as fast, or as quickly as possible.
I think before I request the DM to make his concluding remarks, I'm going to request perhaps the DG to come through. DG, can you please also take to the podium?
Thank you, Chair, and a very good afternoon to all the honorable members on the platform. Good afternoon to the DM. Chair, just a couple of issues. I think we've taken note from the department. We will work with ICASA in as far as preparing them for the next session for us then to present. But just to quickly touch on a couple of points, I think that are pertinent. With regards to the network coverage that has been raised by the honorable members, I think that is a reality, Chair. There's certainly a misalignment with regards to what is being reported by the operators vis-a-vis what is on the ground. I think ourselves, we've seen the challenges that are there as far as then inequalities related to whether it's going to be a 2G or 3G coverage, as well as what 4G as it has been reported as well. So we will work with the regulator in as far as to close that gap. We're looking at a project right now in terms of assessing that, collaborating, Chair, with the Taxi Association, because obviously they travel the length and breadth of our country extensively. So they provide us that data as to which areas are not necessarily covered. But I want to also indicate, Chair, that the SA Connect Phase 2 project is also then looking in terms of closing the coverage gap through obviously the deployment that we are doing from the department side together with our entities. And then on the social obligations, just to indicate that we've established a task team between ourselves and the regulator at a technical level, officials level. And this was in preparations for a meeting that the minister is going to have with the CEOs as well as industry association on these social obligations, because I think what you raised, Chair, is quite important, that it's important that we start and we commence with the implementation of these social obligations. And we are willing to come back to you to report on this before, obviously, we go in recess. On the transformation, Chair, there more needs to be done, certainly, in this area. But what we've seen from the SA Connect project is that, one, there are SMMEs as well as ISPs who are actually providing connectivity. And in fact, from the programs that we have through the BBI Centec, we've connected over 412 government sites from beginning of 1st of April this year. So, and these connectivities by and large are in Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and KZN, obviously in pockets where there are no government sites or government institutions are not yet connected. And even though that is supposed to be an obligation by the operators, but we thought that some things that we cannot wait or delay on. And then on the household connectivity, Chair, I'm also happy to report that we've got over close to 4,000 households that have also been connected through the public Wi-Fi hotspots. And obviously we need to harness this. So the project is continuing under the SA Connect. And we're hoping that we will ramp up that figure to almost close to 50,000 households. And then we've created over 175 jobs. Again, this talks to, whilst, as I said, more needs to be done as far as transformation, but we are happy that at least we've seen new entrants in the market in this field. Data prices, I think Owen just spoke about now. We've also seen a slash in that. The SMMEs who are obviously participating in the SA Connect project, we've seen data cost being reduced to even 5 rand, 7 rands per day, up to then 245 rands per month. And this is uncapped data. So we're not talking in terms of the various data packages that you would find in terms of mainstream. And we see, as Owen indicated, that through this, we are certainly hoping that this competition will then give rise to slashing of the data cost across the ecosystem and across, obviously, in all areas, whether it's going to be urban and rural areas. So, Chair, we commit then that we will come back to the committee with the regulator and provide you with real stats as well as figures as far as then the areas that you've raised, where the coverage gaps are in the country, and then the mitigation actions we will put in place to make sure that we close those coverage gaps, and also from a cost perspective to give them the real sense in as far as the packages that are being offered, so that we're able to really trace whether there is meaningful impact as far as then reducing the cost to communicate. Thank you very much, Chair, for this opportunity.
Chairperson.
DM, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to ask that my video should be off because my connectivity is not very stable. Chairperson, I think the first point that I would like to raise is the issue I raised earlier about documentation. So we're not raising these issues we're not being petty when we raise things like this, which is unfortunate, but I do accept the apology. But the point is we should be working together with ICASA. We do understand that ICASA is independent, but at least when we are called upon to appear and present together, there must be that synergy, that coordination. When you finalize the presentation, which is almost significantly different from the one that you shared with us, I think there must be a courtesy for us to at least have that, so that if there's something that we need to raise ourselves as well, we should be able to do so. So all what I'm calling for, Chair, is that let's work together going forward. Even the next appearance, I think we must do better better coordination ourselves with the ICASA, of course, respecting the independence of the regulator. Something else also that I need to raise, Chair. I had Councillor Zimri mentioning that there is a meeting of council and the CEO is there and other councillors. I think, Chair, let's advise the authority, the regulator. You know, when you have been asked to appear before the Committee of Parliament, it should not just be a by-the-way thing. It's a serious meeting that as the executive, we take Parliament very, very seriously and would like to encourage all our entities to do the same. There can't be other meeting of councillors when you have been asked to come and present here. I don't think we should allow that situation. The CEO should be here, the acting chair, the councillors mandated must come and appear before the select committee of parliament and answer the question. I don't think there can be a parallel meeting to this one. Chairperson, I think let's advise ICASA councillors and ICASA as a body to desist from doing that. Although you've got your own independence, but you account to Parliament. And this is the accountability mechanism that has been agreed upon. Chair, on the issues that members were raising, the first one on transformation. Chair, this is a matter that we take very close to heart. In fact, you know that there is an outcry out there that the telecommunication sector people are characterizing it as a duopoly, as a dominance of two players, MTN and Vodacom. And the numbers that are reflected on the spectrum that has been sold attest to that. You can see that both MTN and Vodacom bought the largest chunk of the spectrum, or almost at about 70% or so. So this sale of spectrum has entrenched that dominance of the two players in the market. Of course, there are others who are arguing that this is a capital-intensive industry, and you need a lot of capital. You need to consolidate. You know, previously we were told that the competition must be allowed, but as we move more and more in this system, we are told that it's about consolidation. You need very strong players in the market. I'm not sure whether, I don't want to offer an opinion, Chair, but I think that it's a matter that needs to be looked at. We're working on the next generation spectrum policy. These are the matters that we really need to deal with, because our policy intervention must assist us to transform the sector. You are right, Chair. This is a sector that is thriving post-democratic dispensation, and so we need to intervene policy-wise to transform this sector, to make sure that there is more and more entrance instead of consolidating the market players that are there. So the issue of transformation, we agree with you, Chairperson, that we need to intervene. Unfortunately, the policy lever that we had, that we thought that we were going to utilize to transform the sector, as you know, the wireless open access network, the WAN, we had to abandon that process to allow the spectrum auction to continue for a variety of reasons, which I think a full explanation can always be provided if it's required when we come back. There is an issue I think that we need to really resolve between ourselves and ICASA. You know, we propose in both the next generation spectrum policy as well as even on the ECA amendment bill that we introduce a principle of use it or lose it. Now, ICASA has got its own principle of use it or share it. I think we need to reconcile the two approaches so that from a policy-wise, there's a consistency between ourselves and the regulator. Because it is not just words that are written there, they've got a lot of meaning about using it or losing it or using it or sharing it. So I think there's a need for us to make sure that we align as far as that is concerned, so that there's an appreciation of the policy intentions that we are bringing in. Lastly, Chair, the issue of the cost to communicate, which we agree with you that we need to come back to talk more to the issues, to those issues, to answer the question to what extent has this auctioning of spectrum assisted us to move to make sure that we lower the cost to communicate. We make sure that there is more competition in the market, which are two fundamental questions that you pose to us, which I think that we have not really effectively responded to those questions. In a sense that we demonstrate by numbers that indeed the costs are coming down. I think in the follow-up question, particularly the last colleague from ICASA was indeed attempting to address that, but the taste of the pudding is in the eating. Let's see the numbers. Because this is one issue, Chair, which I always say that the issue of the cost of data, particularly mobile data, is one issue that we are facing a potential revolution in the country. Because more and more business is being conducted online. And because of the situation that members have been explaining here about connectivity. So the mobile penetration is more in the country. And so people are relying on getting data to access the internet. So data has become a serious commodity, which we must make sure that it's accessible to almost the majority of our people. So we need to demonstrate in practical terms that the costs are coming down. So I'm saying, Chair, those are the issues that ourselves were worried about, the cost to communicate. That's why we are bringing this bill to Parliament. But we need to work very closely with ICASA. We are doing that. But I think we can do much better. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, DM, for that summation. And I had wanted to actually talk to this point that you've spoken to of ICASA having gone to another meeting. I have received a number of text messages on my phone as this meeting continues from the members of the select committee. And one member was saying to me that it seems like the ICASA has arranged another meeting. How did he put it? In the sidelines. But I want to put it the way he put it in his own words. Yeah, he says ICASA has side meetings whilst the select committee is having the meeting. No, I think the member who sent me this message is actually understating this issue. I think the main meeting of ICASA is the one that they are having elsewhere, and they have treated this one as a side meeting. I think that's what we must say, Deputy Minister, here, because if the Chief Executive Officer, the accounting officer, is not here, together with a significant number of councillors have gone elsewhere. So they are treating this one as a side meeting, really. In spite the fact that they get their legislative mandate from Parliament, as you put it, they account here. So it's really worrying. I don't know. To me, it looks like condescending that you can do this that we have done. We are really very much unhappy with this. I know maybe in your own understanding, the NCOP as the higher house of Parliament, perhaps you are looking down upon it. We probably meet once in a year, once in a financial year with you. And when you come here for the first time in this financial year, you do this. I think that it is not right. It's undermining us. And we are not wanting to tell us that we're not telling ourselves that we're more important, but we think that you should have really prioritized this meeting and ensure that you come as a collective in a manner that is reminiscent of a structure of your magnitude that is coming to report to the higher house of Parliament that has given effect to your very same establishment. So it must not happen. And actually, I think you need to apologize to Parliament for this, so that it's on record, so that it must never happen again. We don't take kindly to it. And I think it is linked to the fact that you are giving us a presentation that lacks detail. It's like you're just here to tick boxes. And it's not right. As we say that we have to go back and report to the electorate about these issues, which are quite very critical because they affect the lives of the people on a daily basis. And then when we wait for this presentation for so long, and then when we get it in an incomplete manner, we would be unable to answer some of the critical questions that we're confronted with on a daily basis as we interface with our constituencies. So I would really like to appeal to you that we will try to have this meeting before the end of the year, prepare for it and come back as a collective that should be constituted in a manner that would make Parliament to have all the answers that it wants to have. If the CEO is not here, he is responsible for operations, and he leads that operational team, the executive. So it can't be right. What meeting is this that the CEO has went to attend that is so important that it could not have been rescheduled so that the CEO is here together with the other councillors? I'm just trying to think, which meeting is that? You went to meet with the President of the Republic. It would be very interesting to understand what meeting is this. Having said that, I wouldn't want to say maybe the members, if they have other additional questions, they should come back again, because we are all in agreement that you have to come back. So I think we have given you enough to take home so that you can then process and prepare for the next engagement. And we will be reaching out to you very soon. But lastly, it's very important that as your independence is respected in terms of your task, but you must be aligned to what the ministry and the department is also thinking, so that you don't come here not even having interfaced and shared documents with the department, because now we see we are one government, and the constitution says that there are 3 arms of state. But it's very important that the department, as the executive, as a representative of the executive arm of the state, must be kept abreast, and you must actually be aligned, at least in terms of their own strategic objectives and that of ICASA. So we would appeal that before the presentation comes before Parliament, it is always prefaced by the political heads. And those arrangements are in place, and they're in place to ensure that we don't talk past each other, because we shouldn't work in silos anyway, because we're servicing the same citizenry. It's therefore very key that make sure that there is an alignment. You can't have superstructures contradicting in a platform like this and showing a clear misalignment. So this must be remedied so that it doesn't recur. Having said that, on behalf of the honorable members of this committee, we would like to express our appreciation for having come here to make this presentation, which has given light in terms of the work that you have been doing, and highlighting some of the challenges that are confronting you in the course of discharging your responsibilities. We have taken note of that, and from our end, we will give you support, especially where you're pointing us in terms of the difficulties and predicaments that you face as you execute your task. That is where we are here for that. We are here to give support to you. We are here to ensure that we enrich your work. And when we raise questions, we're not raising questions as though we are opposing what you are doing. We are doing so in order to solidify your position so that you can reach a level of efficacy in terms of the work that you do, especially when it comes to service delivery. This issue that relates to network and signal, as the DM was saying, that it affects the economic activities of the country, of businesses, of schools, and all other public institutions, as well as the private operations. So I'm saying, therefore, that the Select Committee is happy to have heard you. We're happy that you have made this presentation. We have raised our matters. Please go and attend to the issues. We are not talking down to you. We'll never do that. We know the strategic position that you hold in the nation. And therefore, reach out as well to us if you want to be assisted in any way that we can be of help to yourselves. This is what we are elected to do. It's our role. Thank you very much, and we wish you a lovely day until we meet again. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, DM and the colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, we will now release you, and then we will have our other items internally in Parliament that we need to deal with. Thank you, DM. Thank you, DG, and thank you, councillors. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, Chair.
Honorable members, there is an item that there are 2 items that I think we need to entertain. The first item is an item related to the trip that we are to undertake to South Americas. And I would now ask maybe the Secretariat to take us through briefly as to what they have done to date, and also the composition of the delegation to that trip and the dates as well.
Thank you, Chair. We have since received the quotes for ground transport.
Can you switch on your camera? We have been on camera, all of us here. Deputy Minister, councillors, members. Are you going to have a difficulty to switch your camera?
Apologies, Chair. I suffer from sinuses, so I don't look good for the cameras. I'm looking very bad.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We have since received ground transport codes, but it was missing Honorable B's ground transport code. So we're still waiting for a code for Honorable B's car. Secondly, the list that I received from the other secretary, the list of the delegation is as follows. It's Honorable Kiva, Honorable Mutise, Honorable Bibi, Honorable Ngwenya, Honorable Nyambi, sorry, Honorable Nana, Honorable Makwala, Honorable DeBrain, and the staff members, which consists of sorry, Mr. Bauer, myself, Uboskati, and Lirox. Thank you, Chair.
How many members are going? The members of parliament?
According to this list, Chair, it's 8 members.
Okay, that's fine. All right. And then the dates?
Sorry, Honorable Chairperson. Apologies before you carry on.
Yes, Honorable. You are welcome.
Chairperson, I didn't hear my assistant's name, Mandla Kutwel PP, on the staff side because he is my assistant.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that will be taken care of. Amanda, it's very important that when this work is being processed, that it takes into account the unique position of Honorable Bibi, because you know that whenever she has to travel, even locally, there has to be someone that assists her who is assigned by Parliament to do that. So it's very important that you don't miss that part so that you have a cost that you had not factored in. If some people were doing work, they must know. You did mention that you are dealing with a specific transport requirement for Honorable Bibi. It is also linked, it also ties up to the fact that she has an assistant. So that must be taken into account.
Apologies for that, Chair. Mr. Bibi has been, his quote has been requested. It's just that I was reading the list of the list that I received from the other secretary. Otherwise, he's been taken care of. He has been,
Okay.
his quote has been requested.
All right. Thank you very much then.
Chairperson.
Honorable Karin, sir.
I also I did not hear my name was read out there.
The names that have been mentioned is Honorable, if I hear her clearly, let me just repeat the names. There's Honorable Modise, there's Honorable Ngwenya, there's Honorable Nyambi, there's Honorable Mkiva, there's Honorable Nana, there's Honorable Makwala, and there's Honorable DeBrain. So those are the 8 members, because Parliament said the delegation must be reduced from 14 in totality to 10, including staff.
To 8.
Yeah, okay, to 8 of the members of Parliament. And names were submitted by the parties, in other words. So it's
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not the secretariat that selects the name. So your chief whip in the party that you belonged had then submitted the name of your colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, if I may chip in.
Honorable Modisa, on which point are you wanting to chip in?
No,
I was going to give you at the end when we have received all the details. Because from this point of the composition, I wanted us to go into the dates so that the dates are pinpointed. Members can then start planning. And Parliament must also write to members so that members, if they need to require visas, they can all get all of that. So something written down needs to be sent to the members by the Secretariat. Can we have the dates, Amanda?
Thank you, Chair. The dates are from the 22nd of October to the 4th of November.
So those are proposed dates, or are they now confirmed?
They are the dates, Chair, that are on the political application.
Okay. Those are the dates, 22nd October to the 4th of November. 22nd, we are leaving the country or we are landing in America?
Leaving the country, Chair.
And the 4th, are we leaving America or landing in South Africa?
Landing in South Africa, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Those are the dates, honorable members. The other specific details of how those dates will be split between Paraguay and Chile will be communicated in the document, which must be made available to the members as soon as the committee can do that. We need that, even if it's a proposed program. Let it be shared so that members know, even if there will be amendments, but let's have a document that members are having in their hand. Honorable Modise, I would like now to give you a definition.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson, for giving me an opportunity. Chair, we can say the date is 22 to the 4th November, but I have a serious concern, Chair. Maybe you will assist me, because for now we are still waiting for one quotation. Why that quotation for Mambibi was isolated from other quotations? Why? I just want to check with this one, because even EU ASCA yesterday and the day before yesterday, I asked him to say why. We cannot wait for one quotation from last week, Chairperson. Last week.
Yeah, it shouldn't even take a day to do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we waited for that quotation from last week. So, but if we are saying this application is still in the hands of Secretariat, not our committee members, it's out of the committee. It's with their managers and so on. But they are just sitting. They are doing nothing to make sure that service provider to provide them with the quotation for one person. And I just my question is why the quotation of Mambibi was isolated from other quotations. So, Chairperson, maybe on your side, can you talk to these people? Because if we are not going to Northwest or Eastern Cape or Limpopo. We are just going to international. We have to apply for visas. We have the international relation. We have to talk to the embassies and so on and so on. At this time, we are left with only 3 weeks, if I may put it like that. And in 3 weeks, even that application is still gonna come to us to sign it and go to Nyambi, from Nyambi to Mamgwenya, from Mangwenya to go to other chief whip and then the house, the chairperson. It's not like when we go to oversight, it's only from the chairperson and house chair. It's the process. And at some point, we will never get a hold of the chairpersons because they are very busy. Not myself and yourself, Kiva. But the secretariat, not our staff, but the management or whatever, I don't think they are taking us as serious. We can't wait for 2, 3 for long. Chairman, we have been waiting for the quotation from before we go to the recess.
Yeah, in July.
In July. Now we are in September, and it's the end of September, but we are still waiting for the quotation. Right.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
No, you are right, Honorable Modise. I did raise my concern before we went to the recess that it seems that this trip is being sabotaged. Someone doesn't want it to happen. And, you know, it would be bad if now we were to really take a posture where we write what we are saying to our seniors to say that we are facing this predicament. Someone is really pulling strings here in this. As Amanda is also reporting here, she is reporting on behalf of someone that we don't know who this person is, saying that she's been told this and this and that. So maybe let's arrange, Honorable Modise, myself and yourself, to meet with the management later today. Let's get the person who is the overall responsible person, that we meet and we have a meeting that is recorded, because I spoke to Honorable Nyambi, I spoke to the Chief Whip, and all of them, they've been saying they are waiting for documentation since July. They are saying we're waiting for the documentation to approve because we know that you are entitled to that trip. As I say, I agree with you. So maybe it's time for us now to crack the whip here because we are really being frustrated. Okay. I think, members, that's what we have in terms of the report. Let me give you assurance that we will speak with the superiors in Parliament about this matter and ensure that we take it forward. We'll first meet with the management that is supposed to assist us to do our work as a committee. And if they fail to give us a clear information, we will then have to take it to the seniors. Yeah, I think then we are good to step off this item and go to the next item. Do we have minutes to consider?
Yes, Chair, we do.
Okay, can we then look into the minutes? Honorable members, those are the minutes of the 20th of September. This was the last meeting we had when we were meeting with the Ministry of Public Enterprises on the unbundling of ESCOM. Okay, go down.
It's 13 hours.
Go to the next page. You can move. Yes, move. Members will raise any corrections that you might have identified because the minutes were sent to us. Go ahead. Those are the minutes, members. Can we have someone moving for the adoption?
Okay, PP Chairperson moves for the adoption of the minutes.
Chair,
And
table for second, Mudise.
Mamu PP has moved and Mayor Tebogo Modise has seconded. So these minutes are now duly adopted as an account of that meeting of the 20th of September. Thank you very much. And the minutes of today must include the discussion that we had and the decisions that we have taken as to what are we going to do with the reasonable suspicion that we have that we are being sabotaged here. So it must carry everything that we said in those minutes, because I would like to use them as a point of reference to this reasonable suspicion that we have. We can't have a trip that has been long coming, being prepared as way back as June. Things are still not clear today. And we are just a month away from the trip, less than a month away from the trip. Because we are basically 28 days, if I'm not mistaken, before we take off. So it's really not looking right. So please, let's have those minutes written in the manner in which we have ventilated here. Members, I think this was the only set of minutes that we had. Am I right, Amanda?
No, Chair, there's other minutes, I think, from the
Can we then?
previous chair.
Yes, I would have preferred you to started with the old ones and end with the newer ones, but it's fine. Bring in the other set.
I'm trying to find them.
Here are the minutes of the 22nd of June, 2022. 2023, yeah. Sorry about that. Can you go to the second page? And these were the minutes where in the Department of Public Enterprises again was briefing us. Members will just pick up if there is anything that is a misrepresentation here. Next page. Next page. Move. Was this issue of the trip not raised in this meeting of the 22nd of June?
I will check the recording and edit accordingly.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members, here are the minutes of the 22nd of June this year. Do we have a mover?
Yeah, thanks, Chairperson. PP moves for the adoption of the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable BP.
Mudisa second.
Honorable Modisa seconds. These minutes are duly adopted with the changes that will be effected. Do we have another set? The last set?
No, Chair. We don't have any other set.
This was the last set.
Correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, let me take this opportunity to really thank you for your meaningful contribution to this meeting. It went very well, and we hope to meet again with ICASA as we have decided. And I really thank you for your deliberations here. This committee is a working committee, and it is seized with matters. Week on week, we are dealing with issues that are very central in the national question of our country. And I'm happy with your contribution, members. Also wish to thank the staff for the work that they are doing to prepare and also to give effect to the minutes that reflect all these sittings. So we thank you as well for your contribution, officials. I think on that note, I wish to declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, members. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Baba. Nifihle kahle mkhulu neso baba.
Siyabonga mama.
Nifihle kahle mkhulu. Thanks.
Siyabonga.